Hey everyone, welcome back to the realm. I'm Gina.
And I'm Rich still.
And we have with us today, we are in like the third part of this series. We started talking about ghost spirits and entities during our October scary month, our spooky month. And at the end, we talked about ghost spirits and entities, and we realized that there was a lot more that went into this for like communication with ghosts and techniques and different things that were used to communicate with ghosts and are we really picking up paranormal evidence when we're doing investigations or just people experiencing them in their homes? So we decided to dive into it a little bit further. And on that episode, we had Brian and Rob with us who are here today. Hello, gentlemen.
Hi.
Uh,
Hello.
and so they've been gracious enough to go through this series with us. So this is the third installment. We'll have a fourth and final one coming out in 2 weeks where we'll kind of do a summation of everything. So today, Rich, Rob, and Brian are going to take over the episode. I had planned a couple weeks ago, just kind of sit back and be like a listener and hear what they have to say and throw in my 2 cents. And as you can hear with my voice, it was probably a good idea. I think I like prophesied that I was going to get COVID. So I'm going to sit back and relax and enjoy the show. And these guys have decided to take on some topics today. And what we're doing today is considering other theories on what paranormal encounters, what we call paranormal encounters with ghosts, spirits, entities, that kind of thing, whether it be through EVPs, which we talked about in the last episode. So if you need to catch up, you need to catch those other 2 episodes previously. We talked about video evidence, photo evidence, communication with the dead through many different tools. And so today we're going to consider that there's other theories of what's to explain of what these encounters or what this evidence could possibly be coming from. And so today we're going to be talking about aliens and extraterrestrials, other dimensions. Could it be a shared psychosis? Could it be an unseen magical world that some people believe in, or even something with the elements or, sacred geometry? Who knows? Mythology from other cultures like the jinn, things like that. Or is there like an influence from pop culture? So these guys are going to take it from here and kind of go piece by piece with those. So, Rich, I am going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, newlywed. I appreciate that.
Thanks. Oh yeah, I got married in Vegas. For those of you who don't know,
Woo, yay!
Dude,
See the Facebook page, see the pictures.
and I brought back COVID.
Nothing bad happened.
No, not at all.
Anyway,
We'll talk about it.
Rob and Brian, thanks for joining us. I just want to say that again. It's a pleasure having you guys on. I think you guys add a great dimension to our podcast. So I think it's been great having you guys on, and hopefully we can continue this on. I think we blend well. I think Gina would agree with that, and I think maybe you guys might agree as well. I think obviously otherwise you guys wouldn't still be doing it if it wasn't something that we're having a good time with. So I just wanted to say thanks for that. I missed last episode because I was up feeling under the weather, and thanks for picking up the slack. I didn't want to bow out, but at the last minute I had to, up until about 5 minutes before I was planning on being on, but I just couldn't keep my eyes open. My head was pounding so bad, and there's no way I could have sat in front of this computer. So thanks guys for taking over. I appreciate that.
You got it.
So what I want to talk about is different dimensions and maybe the investigating methods that we use, or parallel universes, so to speak. I was thinking about investigations that we do or we have done in the past where you hear a lot of talk of portals. Seems to come up a lot recently. I've never seen. Yeah, that came up this weekend. Myself and Rob did an investigation with Supit. Also, some of our friends over at Wicked Darkness, check them out if you ever get a chance. It came up again. I'm not sure my feelings on that. I've never experienced any type of feelings or anything positive, negative, or indifferent, regardless of what people usually want to try to preach to you about it. Whenever you go somewhere and everybody's talking about, oh, there's portals and don't go near it, or do go near it, or this is going to happen, or whatever. I can't say one way or another that we've ever experienced anything with that, but it seems to be a hot topic of haunted locations. I've noticed. Another thing that is a common thing is like the Skinwalker Ranch, a lot of alien activity stuff, like the Beast of Bray Road. I sat in a seminar a couple weeks back up at Milwaukee Paracon, which is very dangerous to go to. I've been to a Paracon before. This was my second one, and I spent the whole time sitting in lectures or listening to speakers, and I was just mesmerized by what these people were saying. And it was amazing to me that I could sit there for an hour on end, 3 or 4 times consecutive, listening to different people talk about something, or how interesting they could make something sound. And one of the speakers was out in Elkhorn, who owns the property of Beast of Bray Road out there with the Beast of Bray Road, the Dog Man or whatever. And for anybody that wants to look it up, it's out here in Wisconsin. It's kind of like a werewolf type creature. So is what they're saying.
Josh Gates has had an episode, so people can.
I'm gonna have to watch that because,
yeah,
like I said, this guy talked for an hour.
Or Expedition Unknown, but one of them was. It was pretty good. It was interesting.
And I want to watch that one because I didn't realize he'd even had one.
Mm-hmm.
But where I'm going with this is that in Skinwalker Ranch, they were bringing up the talk of aliens and using portals in different dimensions of how these things travel and appear. So somehow they're trying to they think that's related. I'm not so sure on that because, you know, I looked up what dimensions are, alternate universe, stuff like that. And here's what I found. The definition of what they say a dimension is, it's the inner space of reality. And it's a part of the world with higher energy frequency that our physical senses can't see. So the way they liken that is like ultraviolet light. We can't see ultraviolet light, but bees can. Mm-hmm. So is it just something we can't understand? We just can't see that? Is it that quote unquote veil that is between our world and another? One other thing something that John E.L. Tenney said, if you don't know who that is, look him up. He's an investigator and he's a very wise man. I like him. He's a good guy. He says that when you talk about ghosts, per square mile or depending on where you're at, there's ghosts everywhere. Every place is haunted. It just depends on what comes through or what you're able to see. So like if the house next door is haunted, odds are there's ghosts there, there's ghosts here, there's ghosts or energy of everything everywhere. It just depends on what you could pick up on or what chooses to show itself. So when we're doing investigations, I brought this up last night to Rob and some of the other guys at the investigation went to. When we're listening to EVPs and stuff, are we really hearing a ghost or spirit or entity that we think is right there? When we do like EVP sessions and we're asking questions, I would say from my experience, 75% or more of the time, you don't get an answer, or you don't get an answer that you're asking. We may be sitting there for an hour asking for, tell us your name. Can you tell us this? Can you tell us that? What are you doing here? And we get a hello, but it's not in response to a question we're asking. So is that really something that's an intelligent spirit trying to communicate, or is it residual? Could it be just a residual energy that's just popping through? However, or on the dimension side of it, is it just that somewhere else in a different plane, there's somebody there, and we're the apparition or spirit, and they're doing the same thing. So I think that just kind of even opens up more questions as to
like a bleed through, like
like a bleed through. Have any of you guys seen the movie, the TV show Fringe? Have you ever watched that? It's probably a few years back, but it's based on the same type of thing where there's an alternate universe and they figured out a way to go between the two. And then at certain aspects of the show, there's bleed through where you could see, some people were able to see different parts of the other universe. So basically there's two of me, there's two of you, Gina, there's two of you, Brian, but maybe you're not doing the same thing in that other universe, you know? So
you're saying like when you're home alone and you hear a voice or something and you're like, hello, that could actually be something bleeding through from another dimension.
Oh, that's really good. I like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's something to think about. I mean, could there really be another place just like this someplace else in another dimension? And there's other people, maybe, you know, us, of course, but other individuals, maybe in another dimension, I'm not married. Maybe in another dimension, I don't have kids, you know, maybe I'm still the same age, but maybe it's a different path.
Well, also, like if you think about disembodied voices, then
Correct.
Is that just the other dimension bleeding through? Like, could that be possible? I think
makes me wonder because
I think we need to have Patrizia, Dr. Otzi, back on to talk about this possibility.
Yeah, you know, because after we talked the first time, I really started thinking about that EVP thing I brought up, because I started looking back and I'm thinking all the times we've ever had, myself anyway, we discussed it last night that, okay, we had some that were kind of pretty direct, vulgar answers to some individuals that were investigating with us. So odds are those were probably direct. I mean, he wasn't asking questions, but he was kind of prodding and poking, and he got some vulgar responses for what he was doing. But some of the stuff that we got, if you're just sitting there, a lot of times, we found out that when we do get responses to EVP, or we get EVPs on recordings, it's when we're not even asking questions, or we're not even talking to spirits or entities. We're talking amongst ourselves, and something all of a sudden pops in. So is that just somebody else trying to join the conversation somewhere?
It's interesting.
Sometimes the answers don't even make sense if you think about it. All right. I mean, yeah, hello makes sense, but if we weren't even if we didn't say anything, and if I said, can you say hello? Or if I said hi and then answered back, hello. Okay. But if you're just sitting there talking and we said, what's your name? How old are you? And then you're sitting there for 10 minutes and nothing. And all of a sudden you get a hi. Well,
you're making me not even believe in like spirits or ghost hunting. Now I just want to do investigating into interdimensional travel, because they talk mathematically about infinite amounts of multiple universes. But now it's like when we go somewhere and we investigate, we know Joe died there. And so we walk around going, Joe, are you there? And you can hear him cuss us out. Maybe in the other dimension, Joe's alive.
Yep.
And I've seen videos where people are supposedly videotaping ghostly goings on at their house, and they're yelling at the ghosts. So maybe in the other dimension, Joe's alive. And he's just like, freaking out because we're doing the haunting.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Getting rid of all my equipment.
It makes me think about Lost and Stranger Things. In Lost,
very good. Lost is a good example of that.
Right. I mean, in there was a little bit of, you had a couple different things going on where you had time travel, but it wasn't really time travel. It was the consciousness of one person going into their consciousness in another time. But then you also did have literal time travel. And on Lost, you had the people who were literally traveling through time on that island in the present day. So if you were to watch season 1 and they hear voices in the forest, later on you find out that those voices might be those same people or people they know who have traveled back in time and are there talking, and that's what you hear. It's only a whisper, but that's a whole time travel thing, which I don't even open up that right now. But it also makes you think of Stranger Things, where you have, the upside down with it, which is just another dimension exactly like ours, but it's monstrous over there. It's decaying. However, you have that same thing where when somebody gets on the other side, you can hear voices, or there's ways that it comes through. You have a telephone where it comes through. You have Will using the electricity and the lights to be able to make those light up. So you're still getting that communication, but it still goes with that. Maybe it's just something on the other side of that veil that we talk about. That's really interesting. When you say, you hear a sound and you say hello, but then you guys get an EVP and it's hello, and that just might be from that other dimension, not necessarily a ghost. That's really interesting. Like, that's a really good way to really break that down to its simplest form, is just that hello that you hear. It's somebody else on the other side. It's interesting.
If you really want to get technical about it, and I think a lot of people feel the same way and say it, is that this paranormal investigating stuff, it's not a perfect science, and it's not no one is ever going to, with whatever's out there right now, going to for sure say that ghosts exist. You're not going to get anybody to say that. It's a positive and it's for sure thing. It's doesn't happen. So I mean, it's open to interpretation, I think, and other theories of to what it could be. And everything that I just said is also open, and no one's ever going to positively say, yep, that's exactly true, because that's all theories, but it's something to think about, because we don't know. But it's also a different way of looking at it when you are going into these investigations, is to think about it a little bit differently than just wandering in there. Because if we're really going to do it justice, and we want to go in and investigate, and Rob and I talk about this all the time, we go in and we kind of feel bad when we're done, because we're like, are we doing this right? Because how come every time we go somewhere, we don't find shit, but we can debunk everything? Yet 25 other groups, this is the most haunted place on the planet. Oh my God. So either we're doing something wrong, or we're just
doing it absolutely right.
You're doing, that's what I would say. You're doing it the right way.
Everything's not a ghost. And just because the guy behind the counter tells you it is, we still have to do our justice we have to do our due justice to see if it happens. And I've always said that from day one. I'm a skeptic, but I'll believe if it can be proven to me. I'm more than happy to believe any of it, but I want to see it. I want to have proof. So that's what I got on dimensions. I hope that was something for you guys to think about. So
it's good.
Very good.
So who's next?
I think I'll go next. First, we can't ignore the fact that you said Rob and I bring another dimension to this podcast right before you were doing your topic on dimensions.
Yeah, well,
bravo.
Well,
I need to insert like a drum, like,
It was good. You played it straight. That was nice.
Well, I was serious though. I like having you guys on here. I mean, from when Gina and I had the first, Gina had this vision way back when and said, we're doing this. I don't know that we ever thought this is where it was going to go, but I think I'm glad it's this way, because I think Gina and I can sit and talk and bounce things off each other all day and have a great time, and it works. But I think having other people with us that can have other things to say and can challenge us, and we can challenge them, and we can bring it to the table, I think that's just great. And when Kez is here and Jenny's here, I mean, that's great too, and hopefully we can have some episodes where it's all of us on there, because
that'd be fun.
I think it'll just be amazing. So
and that's why I love having guests on too, like interviewing people. We interviewed somebody who has their master's in artificial intelligence, and we talked about artificial intelligence.
Yep.
We interviewed a subatomic particle physicist that works at CERN. So we've had our share of people on here that we've also been able to talk to, and so that's been very cool too, because we're not just playing armchair quarterback, so to speak. We're really just trying to answer the question. Like, I'm sure all these other people out there have the same questions we do. So
that being said, I agree. I'm guessing Rob agrees. It could all just be a shared psychosis, but I hope that it's real. I hope that this really is going well. And with that, my topic is shared psychosis. That wasn't nearly as smooth, but I tried.
Oh, well, A for effort.
It was a long way to get there and not a good payoff. I'm better than that. I can do better.
We can edit that out.
Yeah, we can.
Leave it in. It's good stuff. So with the shared psychosis, what you essentially have is you have one person who has a delusion or a belief, and they can bring one or more people in to that same idea that they have, either through a close relationship, shared beliefs and things. You're able to get somebody to have the same ideas and thoughts and corroborate your story, even though that story may not be what they think it is. But the interesting thing is you could take those people who have a shared psychosis, hook them up to a lie detector, they'll pass it because to them it's real. It doesn't mean they're right, but they believe it. So kind of looking into that, the best way that I thought to maybe have, you, Rich, and Rob to be able to bounce it back when you look at the paranormal field, especially when you're talking about EVPs, I think the easiest way to think of how shared psychosis applies to that is when you hear an EVP, if you take one person who listens to the EVP and they hear "get out," and then they pass it to the next person and they say at 1402 it sounds like "get out," and then the next person listens and goes, yep, yeah, I think you're right, it's "get out," and then now you just start that telephone game. It doesn't mean that the first person is wrong with what they heard, but it also means that it's no longer an objective take because you believe it's now real for that second person. Or, if you're driving around in your cars and one person sees something in the sky and thinks it's a flying saucer, and the other person goes, yeah, I thought I saw a light too. And they go, yeah, and it was spinning. And then the other person goes, yeah, I think it was kind of spinning. It's not really their thought, but they're getting influenced by the other person. Again, doesn't make it wrong, but it makes it makes it uncredible because you're just not sure. So when it comes to EVPs that you guys deal with a lot, is that something that you feel like happens? And when it does, are you aware of it? Or do you kind of take a step back and go, wait a minute, maybe we're not on the same page? Or have you been doing it long enough that when you've collected enough other evidence that maybe you put more stock into it? But if you get one, I hope I'm asking the question right. Like, how do you distinguish from, I'm hearing it because I was told, as opposed to looking at it objectively all the time? Do you get what I'm saying? Is that difficult? Is it easy to do? Well, do you find yourselves doing it at all?
Sometimes I feel that it's plain as day. You can hear it plain as day. Other times when it's, questionable, I think as a group, when we pass it around and listen to it, you can agree with them, but sometimes you're just not sure. And I feel like, well, at least for me, and I feel like sometimes for the team, is we don't necessarily all jump in the same boat, but sometimes It's plain as day. But what made me think about this, I thought about when you were talking about this goes as to any, like a known haunted location.
Oh, yeah.
Even to where we were this weekend, we had a conversation like this because the proprietor will say it's haunted and it has this long history of being haunted. And you got people that come in there and they say they want to see a ghost. So they're like, yeah, it's haunted. And they get stuff and they collect stuff and they put it on YouTube and you listen to it and you're like, I don't even know if that's a voice. I don't know if that's
right.
If that's an apparition, could be a cloud of smoke from your breath, and that's a dust orb, So yeah, I get that psychosis. It moves around amongst the sheeple, if you will.
Sheeple.
The easily manipulated people.
I agree with that. I agree with that. That was a good comparison there, Rob, because you're right. That's definitely what we deal with almost at every investigation, whether it turns out to be semi-true or not. That's how they all start, is you got someone telling you this is the most haunted place, number 3 on the list in the world or the country, and we have all these things that happen. I'm going to show you where. I'm going to tell you what it did. Tell you what. So then they give you all these things in your head, and I would almost be willing to go to a place and not know anything, and just see what happens, because I think then
that would be great.
Then I think it's more genuine when we do find something.
I tell you, that's why I like what I do. Not to interrupt, but that's why I like what.
Oh, I get it.
My role
totally
was not knowing anything and walking into things blind. It was amazing, because then anything I did or didn't feel, it just made it that much more exciting to me. But
that is exciting when that happens.
And Brian, I agree with you also, and Rob, when we do listen to that stuff, sometimes it's easy to. It's pretty obvious what the things say, and other times when it's not, I don't have a problem with saying I don't know what it says and trying to get the general consensus of the group, because sometimes they are pretty hard to decipher what they're saying. So I don't know that our group has that issue where it kind of leads one person to believe something else, but I know exactly what you're talking about. I do believe that there's probably people out there. And there's probably groups out there that probably operate that way, and I think that does a disservice to everyone, and doesn't help us when we go someplace, because that, as I was saying earlier, you go to a place and you can find out that when we go, we don't find anything or barely find anything, and someone else that was there, or 25 other groups supposedly found all this stuff, and it's all the same. Well, why is it all the same? Like you're saying, is it because everybody just thinks it is because they were told it is? And that's
it. It made me think that when Rob brought that up, because that was a really good example to give. And it made me think that how just a little bit earlier, Rich, you said that, how come you guys go in and you go, are we doing something wrong or are we doing something right? When we go into a place that's supposedly so haunted and you come away with nothing, me being a skeptic, but who does believe in a little bit of it or wants to believe, I look at that and I think that that's great. And that's when you think of other groups who go to the same places that you do, and it's a totally different experience. Sometimes I think, especially when you can debunk things, well, all of that goes on to the side of you guys. You're doing it right, because if you do have a known haunted location, and you have people, like you said, Rich, it's always the same experiences. Well, if the first person who thought that their room was haunted because the lamp fell over, and then that story goes to somebody else, and then by the end of it, you have people who are staying in a room at a hotel that is supposedly haunted, and their glass, slides because of condensation and bumps the lamp, and they go, oh, a ghost must have hit my lamp. Is it? Well, no, you're focused on the lamp, because you've heard that before. Otherwise, you would have seen what happened or figured out what happened. So that's really interesting. I never thought about it that way, that when places have the same experiences all the time, but you don't have anything substantial to back that up, it's really interesting to think about that, of, well, where did that come from?
So that was the joke the whole weekend, was that we debunk everything, and that's why we can't get any sponsors.
Yeah, because we feel like we should have Subway and Quick Trip for sure, because those are the two places we visit the most. So
and Subway.
Yep, Subway. And at one point we were thinking Roto-Rooter, but I'm not so sure that was really something we needed.
We say, well, Roto-Rooter
probably. That's good.
Yeah, there's some big personality.
It's been done before. It's flogging a dead horse.
but the Subway just brought the Happy Gilmore image into my head.
When we're done here,
trio.
When we're done recording,
what you got, Rob?
I'm
all done with psychosis. Yeah.
When they talk about interdimensional travel and moving through different planes, I thought about, it was just interesting because that was always the Bigfoot theory, right? That's why you don't find any corpses. Interesting. No, one of the first The first topic was about, and we had talked about this a week or two ago in the series, about how we might not be actually communicating with spirits. We could be communicating with aliens. That could be where a lot of this communication, like how do we know? And a while back, I had seen a UFO documentary on Netflix, and it was decent. It was they were talking about stories I didn't know. UFOs is one of my favorite areas of paranormal, so I take in a lot of that. But they were talking about stories I had never heard. They were showing pictures I had never seen, and they were going on. In the last part of the show, they started talking about how UFOs could be vessels for demons, right? Spiritual beings that have never existed in material form, as a vessel to get into the material world. And that, they were demons and they're probably bad and blah, blah, blah. And they had this picture and they backed away from the picture. It was actually like a display. And this priest came out and he started babbling religious stuff. And then the whole thing was like a commercial for like some religious something. And I felt violated because I wanted to see all this UFO stuff. And I was like, oh my God, you just kind of ruined everything. And I never really thought much about it until it was brought up the other day. And so I did some research, and there was other things that I knew about. It doesn't talk about, of course, in the Bible, the earth is flat and there's water below and above, and it doesn't rotate and everything rotates around it. So it doesn't talk about any other life on any other planets. If there was some interesting stuff I found where they were talking about certain books of the Bible were mentioning weapons from other worlds, as far as beings visiting from like I don't remember how it was worded, non-material or not human visitors coming through. So a lot of it came out to be, what I was looking at was it came out to be religion. But I didn't want to get off the ghost stuff too much. But a lot of the spirit box came up. And I was thinking that if advanced civilizations like aliens wanted to communicate with us, why would they communicate through a Ouija board or a spirit box, something as indirect like that, unless they just wanted to mess with us, or, maybe some of the alien kids, eating some gummies and just wanted to mess with the humans and stuff. So I wondered about that. And then I found this thing about Frank Sumption, who is the creator of the Spirit Box. I thought it was a weird name, Sumption, right? Like
Sumption. Yeah.
Sumption. But I read about this guy. He thought he was an alien. He was waiting for aliens to come pick him up, and he thought that the spirit box was also communicating with aliens or creatures from another planet. Stuff I never thought of. And now, as we talk about multiple universes and interdimensional travel, ghosts, right?
What if we are the ghosts to the alien kids on the Ouija board? What if we're the one talking to them?
But the thing is that if the aliens are here and they are flying around their UFOs, they already know we're here, right? Right. So it would be more physical. And I did, like, in Hindu religion, and I'm horrible at trying to pronounce words that aren't easy English words, but Vimanas are flying vehicles that they actually have diagrams for in the Bhagavad Gita. So there's a lot of parts about battles in these things, and heat, like fire weapons that are bright as the sun, which a lot of people believe were nuclear wars. And when you go back and you look at primitive civilizations and their beliefs in God, the gods always came in vessels from other worlds, from stars. So it kept coming back to this deeper aliens as gods or aliens as demons or devils. And to me, like I said, I felt like I was straying away from the whole spirit and the ghost thing, because I just don't know that, in my opinion, ghosts would come flying in on a spaceship. So, but it's also, we don't know who we're talking to on a spirit box, right? And that has been one of the things with Ouija boards, especially using a Ouija board by yourself, is you don't know who you're talking to. And a lot of people believe that, especially if you get into certain religions, that a God is not going to keep you here. It's going to take you wherever the afterlife is, a heaven or a hell or some kind of afterlife. So if it's still here and it's still speaking to you, it's something demonic. It's evil. So how did they get here? Well, then we're back to, they flew in from UFOs, right? Those are the vessels that bring in the bad guys. I actually was hoping it was harder for me to find information on this subject in the kind of the realm of spiritual and ghost, as opposed to coming into a whole God thing, and just being completely a demonic fallen angel aspect of what my research did. So I was very excited to talk about UFOs and the other aspects of ghosts, but I question a lot of, like, why would they, want to get a hold of us this way, where they could indirectly suck us up in a spaceship, probe us, say, hey, we're here, and then spit us back out with weird little transistors keeping track of us. So I didn't really get what I wanted to out of this subject. I was excited for more, and this is what I got.
That's okay. Sometimes that's what happens.
Yeah. You
never know what's going to be at the end of the rabbit hole, right? When you go down it. So,
right. Because the other part was stuff I had never ever researched or heard of. So then I was like, holy, what is this? Oh my goodness. And I just found tons of information because it was completely new to me.
mm-hmm.
Are ghosts actually aliens? It's a tough one to actually accept, because are they demons? Well, I don't know. Could be.
I never thought about it either.
Why would they probe us?
Right.
Unless they were evil creatures, right?
Right.
They got to study us. Do they need to study us if they're demons? Maybe they're trying to figure out how material beings work, because they can't function on the earth without having a vessel, right? Maybe that's why possessed people don't get out of bed and run around and cause chaos as a powerful entity. They just don't know how to function in the vehicle that to exist on a material plane.
That's a really interesting.
That's interesting. Point.
Yeah. That's a pretty.
Well, I've kind of thought about, if we do have souls and we do have a spirit, the one part of the body that, even though we have a mild understanding of, but we can't actually see the function, we might see the electrical impulses, but the brain's just goo. Maybe that's the cockpit for the soul, right? And that's how we exist on the physical plane. Body is just a vessel, right? We always say that the body is just a vessel. Mm-hmm. We're the vehicle for the spirit, and without it, you can't physically exist on this plane. You're a ghost.
Interesting.
Or a demon.
Yep. Gives us something to think about. All right. Well, the next topic I took on was ghosts or spirits in other cultures. So I looked it up, and the one that I've always was fascinated with was the jinn, which is Islamic mythology. It's a type of spirit or demon. It's more of a like a genie almost. You guys are aware what a jinn is?
Yes, I am. I've watched several videos on the topic, because there's still even stories that our military in modern times will talk about, traveling through the Middle East and
Mhm.
having weird experiences that they believe are the jinn.
Right. Yeah. Kind of almost
I
like
saw
a
Wishmaster, so that's what I got.
yeah. It's kind of like almost like a dream walker type thing where it'll get into your subconscious. That's part of its plan and drain you of your essence and try to take over that. Kind of a creepy type of background there. But I've seen a lot of that in like pop culture stuff. So that's why I know most about it from watching different TV shows, and it's amazing how many times it has popped up. I just thought it was kind of cool, and I think that almost everyone that I've seen has kind of portrayed them the same way. I found a bunch. I found a list of them here. I'm just gonna go through the list I have, and hopefully I pronounce them properly, because of course when you find out of ghosts or spirits from other cultures, they decide that they should add a whole bunch of different letters in there that don't look like they belong. So here's one from Scandinavian folklore. A Genganger is what it's GJ. Why would you put those two together? EN, another G, AN, and another G, ER. So I mean that's just crazy. The description of this one is it's a ghost that looks like a regular living person. It's a malevolent spirit that kills people by pinching them. So if you're not scared of anything else, now you got to be worried about being pinched by something.
I think I live with that thing.
What's that?
I said I think I live with that one. There's a whole lot of pinching.
Don't say it too loud. Let's see. It says the victim will turn blue.
I'm going to get one now. I can feel it coming.
It says the victim will turn blue and his or her body will slowly rot with the heart decaying last.
That sounds awful.
Well, in these other different areas around the world, they like to really scare you. That's kind of like the Krampus thing, right?
Oh, well, hey. Hey, we have a personal Krampus story from Dad.
Well, we'll save that because I think when we get to Christmas time, we should do a Krampus episode, and you can bring that up.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
We got one here from out of Malaysia and Indonesia. It's the Toil. The Toil is a dead fetus.
Yum.
Yes, I said that on the show. That has been brought back to life.
Yes, a zombie
by black magic.
Finally.
And here, you're gonna like this one, Rob. The Toil looks like a little green goblin with red eyes, and they work for their masters, committing theft and other minor crimes on their behalf. To maintain their loyalty to their masters, their Toil's milk, small gifts, and sometimes their own blood is what they give to them. Milk, small gifts, and their own blood.
Sounds like a witch's familiar.
Yeah. And it says that they will suck the blood from the toes of the people when they are sleeping.
That explains everything.
So, I mean, we've ghosts here, I mean, what's the worst can happen? You see a ghost, at least they're not sucking the blood from your toes when you're sleeping.
Do we know that? We don't know that.
We don't have proof of that. From Temba, Tanzania, we have the Papa Bawa or Batwing. Yeah. So kind of this is where Batman came from, people. It says the story of the Papa Bawa emerged only a few decades ago during a period of intense political upheaval following the assassination of the nation's presidents. It usually attacks at night. It is known for sexually assaulting its victims, especially men.
Like a succubus?
Kinda, yeah. That's what I'm taking from it. Yeah. It says in 2007, the BBC reported that fear of the Papa Bawa had spiked in Tanzania. Some men were staying awake or sleeping in groups outside of their homes. Others were smearing themselves with pig oil, believing that will repel the attack. So instead of garlic, just get some pig oil.
I got that handy all the time.
Okay. Let's see. What's another
one?
Says
the vegan.
The Strigoi.
It's plant-based pig oil.
You know what a strigoi is? Strigoi. Strigoi. It's Romanian. Does that give you a clue?
Is that like a vampire?
Bingo.
Hey.
It's a vampire-like ghost that feasts on human blood. These ghosts were once people who lived or died under unhappy circumstances, meaning maybe suicide or they were unbaptized, illegitimate or unmarried. They have purple eyes and red hair. I don't have a picture.
Right.
So I can't. I do have pictures of some of these little things here. So I will try to post stuff on our Facebook page after the fact with some of these, just so people kind of get here's what Brazil gives us. Brazil gives us the La Pisaderia. This is a Brazilian ghost. This tall, thin woman with red eyes again.
Always the red eyes.
Creepy, long fingernails who hangs out on rooftops and watches people eat. So it's a food critic. If someone falls asleep after a big meal, can't make this up, people. She will sit on his or her chest, waking them and keeping them paralyzed under her.
What is that called?
La Pisaderia. It's a Brazilian ghost.
Yeah.
It almost looks, from the picture they show, kind of looks like a banshee almost. It's kind of what I take from the.
So the same place that has Carnival also has the thing that you described.
So when you're done partying and eating
sense.
as much as you can,
yes,
run home, lock your doors and windows because there's something on the roof. That's not Santa Claus. He's coming to get you. All right, let's see. Train ghosts. How about let's look at train ghosts. Can you think about where they might be from? Where's a country that's dependent and big on trains?
The North Pole. No, I don't know. Did you say trains?
Train ghosts. This is actually something that's a train ghost. It says a number of cultures have ghosts linked to specifically to train injuries, which I have heard several stories that I've listened to on some haunted podcasts of real life locations. There's quite a few actually that have to do with trains, either train accidents or things like that. Anything that was like a big tragedy, which I guess I'm not surprised. I mean, maybe not so much now, but back, when trains and stuff first came out, I mean, or in this case here, in India, I've seen the pictures of, everybody's hanging on the side.
Yeah, everybody's hanging out.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not really a lot of probably safety measures there.
No.
One of the train ghosts is a Skandohokatas, Skandhokatas, Skandohokatas are headless ghosts of people decapitated by railroad trains.
Oh,
that's in India. In Japan, there's the Teki is a ghost of a schoolgirl who was sliced in half by a train. So as a spirit, she carries a scythe along with the lower half of her body and arms, making a tek sound as she moves along. So kind of like the Predator.
Sweet.
Hence the name. If she stumbles across a living person, she slices them in half with her scythe. So she's kind of like a Grim Reaper, so to speak. And the last one,
Please be Kenny Rogers in the United States. That's what the train ghost is. That's what I picture in my head when you say train ghost. Is I picture Kenny Rogers, the little sack, playing cards with a guy named Cookie or something like that.
I hate to ruin it.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
I remember when Kenny Rogers was on the Muppets and did that.
Yes,
song.
yes.
You say train ghost, and I immediately think Kenny Rogers.
Well, right, because when he was sang the song on the Muppets, that guy turned into a ghost. He was dancing.
Yeah.
Oh.
See? I have no clue what you're talking about. I'm going to have to look it up because I don't know what you're talking about. I know who Kenny Rogers is. I know who the Muppets are. Other than that, I'm lost.
Train ghost. You say train, that's what I think. You say a train ghost, I just think of.
First, I thought you meant housebroken ghosts, trained ghosts, but you said train.
An actual choo-choo.
Actual choo-choo.
Yes. Unless he did say trained. If he said trained, then that's not Kenny Rogers.
No. You're muted, bro.
Sorry, my hand. I wasn't really talking. I was just acting like I was talking.
Good.
I have an animal over here that was a little out of control, so I was trying to do two things at once. I apologize. My wife is now handling the situation. Right?
Good job, Jenny.
Yep. Rob says, "Good job."
So
she just laughed. I don't know what that means, but all right. The last one I got is the La Llorona. La Llorona.
Yeah.
Now, this is. Have you heard this one before?
Oh yeah, I've seen the movies.
Mm-hmm.
Oh really?
Yeah. There's a couple good ones about it.
Okay, it's a Mexican story. Is a woman named Maria. Now, what I took this from was like almost like a woman in white. Is kind of how I
pretty
took
much
this.
Is.
You know,
yeah.
When I first heard the one story, which ironically I just listened to like last week on the way to work, was one of the podcasts of the haunted stories I listened to. This was the one they did, so I was like, holy cow! I just listened to this one. It's a woman named Maria who drowned her children for various reasons. She killed them. Some say she killed them in order to be with a man who then rejected her. And other claims is she was jealous of her children, having committed suicide after murdering her kids. She haunts riverbanks dressed in white and wailing for her children. And the lore is that she tries to kidnap living children if they get too close. So that's the last one I'm going to give you. I mean, there are tons out there that anybody out there that's listening can look up. And I mean, there's just list after list after list of different ghosts and spirits from other cultures, but those were some of the ones I found that I thought were interesting. Like I said, I will post some pictures tomorrow or whenever, Tuesday, of some of these ghosts, so you can kind of get a kind of a feel of the creepiness that goes along with them. So, Brian, what you got for us?
The last thing that I was thinking about, and it's always kind of been there, and just since we've been talking these few episodes, it kind of gets reinforced a little bit more, is the effect that pop culture has on the whole paranormal field. And when I really think about it, you think about movies and TVs and just everything in general that you've seen that has to do with this field. What influence does that have? So I have two ideas on it. One is that all of the makings of Hollywood are what we assign to things. So when you get an EVP, you can't explain it, but it has to be a ghost because that's what we've always been told, is that has to be what it is. Then on the other side, which I've really been thinking about, and I'm not sure where I am yet with it, but the idea that if there are ghosts or spirits or a soul or energy, whatever leaves our body, and if that's the thing that goes on to become a ghost somehow, or goes, to heaven or goes to hell, or is a demon or is a ghost or is a poltergeist or is any of these things, I've been having that idea around my head that if that energy that was in us is sentient, what effect can happen based off of pop culture that we've been told while we've been living? Maybe all of the things that are encountered are all the same energy that was us. It's just a form that's being taken because those are things that we had been conditioned to think about. So maybe a demon isn't some sort of mythical or biblical demon. It's the same energy that the intelligent haunt is. It's just taking a different form because when it was alive, it saw movies about demons and thought, that was cool, or it's just stuck there in their mind. So that's really been something I've been thinking about because I think that's kind of interesting. But on the skeptic side, I go to a lot of the things that are experienced or evidence that's gathered may be a projection from things that we've learned through pop culture. We've given examples in this episode about that, talking about TV shows, Lost, Fringe, Stranger Things. We've said movies, we've, all in one thing, and they all have relatively similar ideas, just packaged a different way. So maybe those things that we've seen our whole lives is what influences the evidence that's gathered. I don't know, like, how do you guys feel about either one of those things?
Well, as a kid, I was super into horror movies at a young age, like far back as I can remember. And I would actually read about, the horror movies, but then that would take you into horror movies. Sorry, I just want to clarify. Horror movies was that, I would watch Dracula. Well, then I would learn about Vlad the Impaler, and then I would learn about vampires and the history of vampires. And it goes on, like the whole vampire mythos spreads around the entire world. And even reading about Frankenstein, there's a little bit of literature out there that talks about a German doctor that tried to make reanimate bodies and was able to keep the human heads alive for a short period of time. So I see that maybe a lot of this stuff has truth into, what the legend and the story and the myth. And as it gets brought, people gather and they manipulate it and they make it interesting, and so they can get their movie made and their show made. And I think, yes, when it comes down to the final product and when you get into TV shows like The Ghost Hunter, people are easily, this is what we got. This is what we got to do. This must be a ghost. Everything's a ghost. Everything's an EVP, and it's a mess.
I think there's a lot of things out there in pulp culture and movies that tell us what we're supposed to believe or what everything is, and that's just how it is.
Yeah, everything, the real original myths and legends just get diluted. It's also interesting to know that the actual stories are there and they're deep, so that's a whole different subject. But once they get it comes into pop culture, it's even worse.
I have a question though, Brian, and because I might have misunderstood because I have COVID brain right now, so I just want to follow this.
I'm not laughing at your COVID. I'm laughing.
No, I get it's just like this real brain, like my brain. I cannot. It's like and we're talking about such incredible. We're trying to understand something quantum in a linear fashion, and it's also hard. But my question is. Were you trying to say, or were you alluding to the fact, or maybe this is just a thought I went on a tangent with, but that if we are to believe that there is something after, like our soul or our sentient self, our intelligent energy, once we leave this vessel and we're out there into the world, are you saying that perhaps that intelligent vessel is influenced by the sum total parts of everything it experienced on Earth as to how it's supposed to behave after the fact? Or did I miss? Okay. No,
that's kind of what has been beaten around my noodle, is exactly the way that you just laid it out. Yeah.
That's a pretty deep thing to consider, because we think that, so we would think that once our energy change forms out of this body and we're into this other energetic self, that we then get all the answers, right? So that's I think some of us think like we end up with all the answers. But what if there was that in between stage where like, well, okay, what are we supposed to do? Because you talk about sometimes there's some people that'll say, oh, spirits are stuck here, which I have my own thoughts on that too, which we'll have to do when we talk the next episode, when we kind of do a summation of all this. I do want to touch on that a little bit. I don't believe every spirit that's here is stuck and, that kind of thing. So I have a lot of opinions about that. But having said that, just because we are bringing up all these other theories and we're talking about all these other things that other people talk about, what if there's that in-between time where we are still so connected to our human experience that we're still programmed in our brain that we haven't quite connected with that one source consciousness yet, and we're still influenced by what we experienced here, and like, okay, I'm supposed to do something. Am I supposed to go rattle some chains, flicker some lights? Like, what am I supposed to do? So I applaud you for that theory, because that's pretty cool. You guys are nailing it with these theories tonight.
Yeah, the last thing I'll end on, the pop culture idea, which had just popped into my head, is that we think about, because Rob, you said that's a lot of those stories that evolve into, by the time it gets to Hollywood, a lot of those probably do have a little nugget of truth somewhere in them, and then somebody's imagination as a writer, forms it into what we know. And then it goes through years and years of that, and then it just piles on top of itself with those similar ideas, just repackaged a different way. The thing that was interesting that I thought of was, if we go back to ancient civilizations, the one thing that they all had in common was something coming from up there, something in a ship, all building the same shape buildings, but we know that they weren't talking to each other. They didn't have a Hollywood that was pumping out, pop culture things for them. Their pop culture was within their own little group and their experiences or ideas. So I don't know. It's super interesting to think either there's something to that they all got the same information and they had the same experiences and documented it without ever talking to each other, or is the human brain, are we all so similar with the ideas that we have about things that they all thought of the same thing? Like, I don't know. It's hard to break down exactly what that thought is, but I guess it's just interesting to think of, did ancient civilizations who didn't have pop culture references, but all came up with, aliens, was that just a natural progression of human thought to go to that place? Or did they all have experiences that led them there? It's an interesting thought.
We can look all the way back to, pyramids. There's hieroglyphs that they believe are depicting these things from space. So that's a good question.
Yep.
Okay. So when this was a brainchild of Gina's and I was asked to do this, and I'm a slacker and I'm lazy and I didn't jump on this thing, and I was really sad when it got started because I was, Rob isn't interested. So to be asked even to do a couple episodes or be interviewed was awesome. I mean, it was great to be part of the chemistry that's involved in this podcast. Thank you guys for actually having me on here.
Well, I mean, I gotta bounce back with that. Just a side note, you weren't lazy. Everything I believe happens in its time that it's supposed to. So like, anytime that when you're friends with somebody and you talk about doing things, I don't think there's like a time limit of like, hey, we got to cash in on this idea. We got to cash in on this activity, like, going to a corn maze or whatever you're asked to go do. Okay. In this instance, it was a podcast. Like, it was just being made, and whoever wants to come, like, as you can see, it's an open forum. And I love to sit back sometimes and let other people just, take the show. Cause it's just, that's what it's meant to be. It's like creating a space for people to come together that like-minded or even not like-minded, so that we can like have an intelligent discussion and talk about things that people are already talking about in their own living rooms or hanging out with their friends. So everything happened as it should when it should. So I always say that. So never say that about yourself again.
Thank you. I won't.
And hopefully you guys join us a lot more. That's it. I'm done. I'm going on mute.
I hope so.
I would love to.
I'm here.
So, what was left, and I got this Unseen Worlds. And when I started to look that up, I kept getting books and songs called Unseen World, but it went into other things that were listed about sacred geometry, which is something I had never heard of, no idea what that was, elements and fairies. So it was interesting to me to read up about sacred geometry, and I had no idea what it was, because when I took it in school, it was after lunch, and it was really hard for me to focus on any class for a while there. But sacred geometry ascribes symbolic and sacred meanings in certain geometric shapes and certain geometric proportions. It is associated with the belief that a god is the creator of universal geometer. The geometry used in the design and construction of religious structures such as churches, temples, mosques, religious monuments, altars, and tabernacles has sometimes been considered sacred. The concept applies to sacred spaces such as, I don't know that word, sacred groves, village greens, pagodas, and holy wells, because then it goes into nature and things like perfection of geometry in the world, which goes into the God creation part, such as pyrite and honeycombs and seashells, that even as the creature inside the shell grows, so the spiral shell, for an example, will just stay, it'll just grow and it'll stay the form and it keeps spiraling, which then, goes into, like, I never knew, but a lot of the construction of cathedrals is based on geometry, that there's more mathematics involved in this than just some kind of like, man, they did a really good job, it's really beautiful and everything's even, and how they did it, that it was thought out, I guess, well, mathematically with the geometry, but it also goes with symbols and floor plans. And the circle comes up a lot as a symbol of perfection in religion, and it's going to tie into something here in a minute. But I mean, any kind of sacred or religious symbol, even if it's a circle of protection, a pentagram, all the geometry that's really in that we don't really necessarily think about, was like, oh, okay, now I see all this. Never really thought of it as sacred. I understood the importance of these things, but that, and there's a lot more spiritual mathematics, spiritual science that goes.
And if I can interject for a second, because it's believed that this geometry in and of itself, the sacred geometry, holds sound and vibration that we as energy and energetic beings, even all life forms, plants, animals, everything is responsive to these sounds and vibrations. I mean, there's a sound in nature, there's a sound in universe. There's people that there's a guy that has a machine that he clips onto different leaves and trees and stuff, so that it turns the vibration into a sound, so that you can hear the song of a tree. And so I'm sorry if you were already going to go there, but I was just like, I get so excited about this because it's also about sound and vibration.
Right. You're right, because everything's on a frequency, and it goes into Om, right? Om is the reverberation of the creation of the universe in the Hindu religion. Yep. Right? So we go into there, and then this happened, right? So I got these topics here, and sacred elemental geometry, right from there into the elementals. So as part of that, I mean, the 5 sacred elementals, solids represent the elementary forces of the cosmos. This is the geometry that forms the building blocks of all matter and energy in the universe. When the vibration of the, maybe you can help me with this, Gina, aether, AETHER, resonates at certain frequencies, it creates the sacred geometry found in the Metatron cubes. The shapes are also correspond to the 7 densities of consciousness. And so as you read into that, it goes into the unity sphere, which goes back to the host circle being a sacred symbol. The sphere is the simplest, most powerful shape. The perfect symmetry of a sphere emanates etheric light equally in every direction. The vibration from a sphere is a highly harmonious and positive one. A sphere is the expression of the divine feminine energy of the spirit in form. So as you go down into the sacred elements of geometry and all the parts of this, well, then we get into fire, air, earth, water, and then back into the etheric spirit. And there's a really big word after that I don't even want to try and pronounce, but it is considered the 6th element of geometry.
That begs the question, like, is that some of the communication that we're getting? Is that possible? Is it possible?
Reverberation, but then that goes back. Then that goes back into what we've already talked about. Where do we go when we pass? right back into the frequency, the reverberation, and we get stuck into, well, maybe not stuck, but we just kind of maybe dissipate, and sometimes maybe that consciousness stays in this loop or this, electrical impulse reverberation. So when you go back into, as I'm looking through all this stuff, there was an interesting page I did find about using sacred geometry in like rituals and whatnot. And that's where we get into like a lot of the magic circles and pentagrams and the elemental spirits and the 4 directions of magic. But also in my research here, when you get into the obvious elementals, especially the 4 main ones, I guess, you get into fire, air, water, earth, and so when we're at a little page here marked for it, but now you're starting to get into the creatures that represent that, and then that brings you into the Fey world, which was another interesting part, because as Brian was talking, and I seen in the history of fairies, and I can't find that page. I had a really cool page that went into gnomes being the earth elemental, which that was my tie-in for it's right here, as being the element, the representative or the spirit of gnomes, the elemental of earth, and it's like undines or undines, and I don't want to say undies, but it is the water element, which also gets into other fairy creatures like mermaids, salamanders, which more look like Pan, being the element of fire, and not syphilis, but the element of air, which comes out to be like actual fairies themselves. With that being said, so then how does that really tie into me with the spiritual world, except for, well, let me touch on this first, because Brian said this, and it was that the term fairy dates back to the Middle Ages and Europe folklore, beginning to appear in both written and oral literature. Fairies play a significant role in many stories from different cultures and religions around the world. So it even talks about the jinn and nymphs. And so that was interesting that it went right into the Arabic, the nymphs and the other world of fey creatures. But what it comes out to be is that, as it says here, that the exact source of these creatures throughout history is pinpoint to a specific origin. However, scholars believe that fairies were pagan deities forced to suppress their traditions by Christian missionaries. As acceptance of Christianity grew, fairies were changed from deity status to a magical creature status to preserve their traditions. Hence, that's why we have, tree spirits and the elementals. And so not necessarily ghosts, but we've been talking about spirits and entities. And these entities, for the most part, a lot of the fae can go into mischievous and protection, and that's why a lot of like Wiccan and other religions, or pagans, if you're not a Christian, uses the elementals and the 4 directions, and there's representation of the elements with these directions, and it comes more into a lot of protection and guidance. And these are the spirits that have never actually been a living being, but are out there in existence to, more take care of nature. And if you mess with it, they'll get you. And if you nurture it, they might help you. But also, poltergeists and other mischievous things that we talk about, that maybe gnomes and other elf creatures could be the ones that cause a lot of that by misplacing stuff, losing your car keys. Some little creature could have moved it. But it was interesting how I started reading on the one topic, because I never heard of sacred geometry. I never really thought of the geometry working into that. And then it got into the elements, and the elements bled into the whole Fey world. And I could read it and go on for a little bit because it's new information to me. And the way it just tied together, it kind of blew my mind. Stuff I never researched. I knew, fairy stuff, mostly, typical myths that most people know, which is probably most of it is pop culture. How I understand my understanding of the Fey world and to what I've been reading, but also like elements. I knew what the elements were, and mostly, you don't want to mess with them because if you play Dungeons and Dragons, they're some of the worst creatures you want to fight. And that was a lot of my knowledge. And geometry was always kind of one of my enemies. So it's also not very practical in my life, but interesting, very interesting that all of it became sacred in some way to spirituality or into some kind of entity or spirit. It's pretty interesting. So in some way it's sacred, in some way of a protection or an entity that has never really existed in physical form. So I don't know if that would count as a ghost or if you would die and be made to protect the trees or whatnot. I think it's more interesting to think that these entities may have always existed, but now they're there to do that purpose. Even though it seems that they were forced to do what they were doing and kind of, dethroned or had their powers taken away by overbearing religions. Sorry, religious people.
It's interesting because when you talk about that geometry and you start breaking it down, the first thing I think of is the Freemasons. And now I'm really interested to look into that a little bit more to see what other ideas or thoughts did they have, why they were so tied to that. That's interesting.
I actually have a great book that we could pass around as a group, and it talks about secret societies and all the things that they use. So I would love to share that with you guys. And pardon me, Rob, I have to completely compliment you on that synopsis in the sense that isn't it wild that like we came up with this outline and we had we're just randomly putting in things that we all talked about for the last few weeks, and Rob goes down the path that he was like assigned to do this week, and every single thing just brings it back to the other.
Yep.
And then ties in perfectly with all the other stuff. And every time something like that happens, I always say that's exactly why I named my business what I named it. And it's called It's All Connected. So it's because literally you can I like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but supposedly like you're 6 degrees away from Kevin Bacon. But I feel like literally everything can be connected just because, like you had mentioned, Brian, I mean, civilizations over time have all kind of experienced the same thing. Either they have, or there's something else going on, like either they've all experienced it because you have different people from different parts of the world that all have the same writings that came to being known and read by scholars and historians, and they're all telling the same story. How? They didn't have social media. They didn't have, the news. They didn't have these books. They had people that would walk for how many ever years in the desert to get to where they needed to go. So it wasn't like they had easy transportation. So I think it's very cool that we talked about all these things in relation to, okay, when we're getting evidence, could it be something else? There's other cultures that attribute their activity to other things. So I think it was really cool that we were able to kind of bring some of that up and talk about it. So thank you guys so much for all your hard work on this episode. And for those of you that are listening, we are going to have links to everything that everybody had brought up. So things they were reading from the websites and everything, they'll be properly cited in our show notes. So you guys will be able to go to those websites and see where exactly they got that information. So we can give credit to those as well. So guys, it was good. Deep breath. Because next episode we're like gonna put it all together. So thanks everybody for hanging in there on this episode. And so see you soon. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Bye.